and welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you have joined Paul and Matt as together we young adults dive deeper into our faith and deeper into the madness of today's world, using Jesus Christ as our guide. Did you guys realize that this is the first episode we've ever had with only guys on it?
I didn't realize that.
This is a momentous, monumental occasion.
Momentous.
I kind of miss Diane, but
Oh wow!
no, I meant I like you guys too, but
You could do it by yourself if you want.
maybe
I'm just happy to be here.
I'll just speak in Lauren's voice. Hey guys,
That wasn't.
that was not Lauren's
I wonder
voice.
how she'll feel about that later.
Probably not real good.
Not really good.
She actually listens to the episodes too.
Right.
I don't bother. I figure I knew what I said. All right, we're talking today about Catholic social teaching, which often is referred to as the greatest secret of the Catholic faith, kind of best kept secret that nobody knows about, that we actually have this whole body of doctrine and documents that have come from the popes, really starting in 1893 with Pope Leo XIII's very famous Rerum Novarum of new things, which, the world was going through kind of a pretty big revolution back then, 1893. That was the big industrial revolution where we saw people flocking to the cities from agrarian lifestyles to now industrial lifestyles. And we saw a lot of huge abuses about how people were, really caught in these low paying and very dangerous long hour jobs, working in mines and in factories. And so the Pope felt the need to address that. And of course, around the same time, Karl Marx had written the Communist Manifesto. Actually, that was 1848, but 50 years later, the communism was really starting to catch on, socialism was starting to catch on, and people were starting to kind of wonder, how are we supposed to live in community as human beings? And the Pope said, hey, we got to answer that question because our faith actually does shed a light on that. Have you, in your life, I know, Matt, you've got a degree in theology.
Well, working towards
a degree in theology.
Yeah.
Have you come across this in any of your studies, Paul or Matt?
No, I went to a secular college and majored in business. So I'm generally opposed. I'm generally consider myself a capitalist and therefore oppose communism. That's about as much as that would relate to this topic in terms of my formal education.
That's fair.
Yeah. So I actually I had a church history course last semester, and so we very briefly touched on Pope Leo XIII's letter.
Okay.
And so that was the first time I think that I ever came into contact with the specifics of the origin of Catholic social teaching, if you want to call that the origin. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, no, I don't think that I had a tremendous amount of material that I came across.
Yeah, most people, I don't think, even in Catholic schools or CCD programs.
Definitely. I was Catholic school. We never learned about it.
Pre-K to grade 12. So maybe I should have gotten in contact.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, even here.
Maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
Oh, man. Yeah.
That's possible. Yeah, it's possible.
I think that
high school kids?
It's not formally, I don't think in most Catholic education, at least when I was going through it, I don't think it was addressed so much so as this is Catholic social teaching. Let's do 6 months on it or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it was more like this is what the Catholic Church believes, and it just happens to be Catholic social teaching.
Right. That's actually, I'm trying to say what he just said, which is that,
kind of
nobody ever gave it to me as a body of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was woven into everything else because really the themes are basic but profound.
Right. Right.
In the Catholic social teaching. Yeah, I have to say my experience of Catholic social teaching was abundantly confusing because I spent a year in Rome studying. And all the classes were in Italian, and I'm terrible in languages, and I'm actually sitting at a table with two Italians who probably would pick it up immediately, but I was lost. And however, there was what's called the note system, where everyone would join their notes together and kind of pass it along so that we could understand. But I had an elective in my schedule, and so I took Catholic social teaching, and there were no notes, and it was just me and a bunch of actual Italian speakers. So no one's helping me out, and I'm a little lost, lost. But it gave me an opportunity to read the documents, though, which was good.
Right, yeah. Blessing in disguise.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think it has so much to say about some of the issues of our time, and really the core, I think, of the teaching of the Catholic social teaching is the dignity of the human person. That, I would say, is kind of the fundamental reality, is that until you recognize that each human being has unique dignity, being made in the image and likeness of God, everything else you talk about really won't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And, is that when we talk about like the social policy of America, how politicians or lawmakers kind of guide our laws, is that even given any consideration?
I think that so Dr. Scott Hahn, he recently wrote a book called It Is Right and Just. I think that's the way it's called. And it's an expose on like liberalism in general, but liberalism in like the negative contents, not just like freedom, but how Western society has developed. And I think in the United States, I think that we had the fundamental founding on Christianity, and a lot of the rights that are in Catholic social teaching were actually of the human person were actually protected for many, many years. And United States is probably, I think the liberal side would say that we're behind, and I would say that we're maintained, or because I'm conservative, so I maintain that, these things are good. And I think we've gone away from that a lot, especially with abortion, a lot of the other policies that we've had in the past 50 years. So I would say that the United States had a good track record, and still does to some extent compared to other Western democracies, about protecting a lot of these rights. But I think we're always about 10 years behind the rest of Europe and 5 years behind Canada. So we're getting there.
True.
And usually 20 years behind Japan, but that's a whole other issue.
Well, Japan never was a Christian country, so they
never was. Yeah.
They have a different.
Yeah. When I was pondering this a little bit earlier, I said to myself, I think that the situation we have in America is that America is proclaiming what they would call social teaching. You know what I mean? They're saying that they're in the right.
Social justice.
Yeah, social justice. Yeah, and in many ways, some things that are popular in our culture are actually just. But when you look at something and always abortion is what stands out, because it's like one of the biggest hot button issues even in politics. The left side, right? They say that they are correct. You know what I mean? They propose abortion as just. And I think that when I do look at it politically, I can't help but think of that whole phrase where like the devil doesn't propose anything original, he just twists what God made, right? And so I look at America, and in many ways that's what I see, that it's just this twist of what actual justice is.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the interesting insights that America had was the idea all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence. And I know that, was that Independence or Constitution?
No, it's Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. Yeah. And we endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. Which was really pretty radical at the time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because rights came down from governments, right? Like the government, the monarch, which I guess at one point there would have been Catholic monarchies and, kind of like loosely religious monarchies, but that the government would be there. The monarch would give you your rights and would have the power to take away your rights. And the founders of the country said no, sorry, these rights come right down from God. And you can't take these away. They are unalienable. You can never lose them.
And there's even that sense in like the divine right of kings that like, men are not, kings are not created equal to peasants. Kings are a higher type of being, and they have more dignity. And this idea that actually, no, everyone has equal dignity. And I know that, back in those days, they didn't include slaves and women, but it was a huge step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really important. And the founding of it's interesting, right? Because if you look at the actual, I don't know if we want to go into the revolution talk, but if you want to go into the religion of each of the founders, it was very different. They each had a different spin. So Thomas Jefferson was, I would say, even though he wrote the Declaration mostly, and there was others that influenced it, he was probably, him and like Benjamin Franklin were probably the loosest religious, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, some would even say like
he did rewrite the Bible.
Yeah, but at least it's more than some politicians today, let's say. And then you have somebody like George Washington. If you read his writings, I mean, he definitely had this air of humbling himself before God, and so he was quite religious. And so you have this interesting situation within the founding of the country where they were Christian in a sense, and they supported Christian morality, but each of the founders had a little different spin on it. I mean, they're Protestants, so they each had a different spin on it. But I think the documents kind of speak for themselves if you look back at it now.
It's interesting, but a couple election cycles ago, I think it was the 2016 election, I was doing some research as to whether or not America could be considered a Christian country. Because a lot of people say, well, with the separation of church and state, there's no set, religion. Right. Well, so first of all, the separation of church and state You know where that comes from?
Yeah, it was a Supreme Court decision.
No.
Well, yeah, yes. They were later on.
Originally,
it was the Thomas Jefferson letter
from
to
Thomas
the
Jefferson letter.
Yeah, from the Wall of Separation.
Yeah, to a church in Danbury, Connecticut.
Yep.
Of all places.
Wow.
Yep,
You know?
Danbury.
Yeah. It was the Danbury Congregational,
Something like
first
that,
Congregational Church.
Right.
And what he was trying to propose was that government will not encroach upon religion, not the other way around.
Correct. And the Supreme Court decision, I think, was in the 1920s. It was Justice Black, who was a Grand Wizard of the KKK. He reinterpreted that later on.
Oh, was it him? Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to, where it was twisted in the other way. And he actually quoted the Thomas Jefferson letter, but kind of incorrectly in the decision.
Yeah.
So,
but what was interesting was that I found actually several Supreme Court decisions where they said out loud in the 1800s, this is a Christian nation.
Right.
And of course, Alexander de Tocqueville, the great
Tocqueville, French.
Yeah, the French guy who like basically examined America and was like, this is what's good, this was bad. He said, the democracy will never survive unless it's based on Judeo-Christian principles, which
That's right.
I think is interesting. So,
Well, our whole Western civilization, going back to the Enlightenment, is founded on Judeo-Christian principles.
yeah.
And a lot of traditional Catholics will bemoan the Enlightenment, but
Yeah.
there's a few things that it got right.
Yeah, you look at the Enlightenment, and it's like, I don't know. I remember again in this church history class, right? We're reading about that period of time and how I believe it was in France, right? Because the Notre Dame, right? The church they for like a 20-year span, they I assume removed the Blessed Sacrament, right? And they erected this like huge statue to a basically general goddess of reason, and it was literally called the Temple of Reason, where they worshipped a pagan goddess that they made up on the spot. like this was not like they took from like an ancient culture.
Yeah.
So
I understand why the traditional Catholic, maybe I'm pulling that card right now. I don't know.
No, and I think and like for any movement in history, there's always good and bad that come out of it,
Right,
and certainly. It did begin this slippery slope away from where things were based on Judeo-Christian mentalities or morals, but then allowed society, but didn't create a good enough barriers to keep society within those bounds. Because of liberal society, they can change and they can twist and they can move over time. And as the population moves away, as the population as a whole moves away from Judeo-Christian, then they start voting that way, right? And then that's where you see the society. So you don't have enough barriers set in place. So the United States is unique in the fact that we have these founding documents where these barriers have been set up.
Right.
But I mean, we can just blow right through those eventually, right? I mean, that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And it's you can look at it as it's almost like a trickle down effect. Any I don't remember where I read this, but it's not. I'm going to screw up what is not an original thought. But it's basically like this idea that as more citizens become atheists, yes, perhaps they will sometimes act morally, but that's because it's like a trickle down effect of their parents and grandparents who were Christians. So we've got these documents, but as we slowly, we as a country, I guess, obviously not the three of us, but, as we slowly but surely move away from this, it makes sense that those documents will be ignored or misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Right. And that I would say is what's, I think that, so even if you take the abortion issue, right, is it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where it's like, okay, well, you take a life, and it's like, well, when we would, at the Catholic sense, we're protecting life, meaning like, don't kill this baby, this beautiful baby. And the spin on it now is like, well, we actually support the life, so some weird love of the mother, or the pursuit of happiness, let's say, of the mother trumps the right of the life of the unborn child.
Right.
So you can twist these things, and that's the liberal society.
Well, that was one thing that made the American Revolution very different than the French Revolution and all the other revolutions like the Bolshevik and Revolution. Is that the rights of the individual can never be subsumed to the rights of the state. Because French Revolution was all about égalité, fraternité, right, equality and fraternity, but they basically believed that the human person could be killed, exiled, whatever, so that these things come about in society. Right. But the American Revolution said, actually, no, the primacy is the rights of the individual. over the rights of society.
Right. And then from a Catholic perspective, we would say, well, wait a second though, but the individual has to be subservient to God. But you can't be subservient. But my always argument to that is, well, you can't be subservient to the state and God. It has to be,
give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Exactly. So
God,
you do what you can for the state. Let's say, God and country and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're not giving the rights to the individual allows you to do God's will, not the state's will.
Right, because with the rights comes responsibilities that each
Right.
individual has to each other. So it's not a total individualism where
Right.
I can do whatever I want because it's all about me.
Catholic social teaching.
Right.
And the responsibilities are influenced by your faith.
Definitely.
Right. And so when you lose the faith, then your responsibility changes, and then it goes away. So in the United States had this kind of bounty of immigrants that have come in over the ages, many of which were Catholic. If you think the Irish immigration,
Italians.
and then the Italians came, and now we have the Hispanic population that's come in. They're Christian, mostly Catholic, and so you have you have several generations of solid Christians that are upholding these things. As the immigration patterns change, and as society as a whole, the majority, which is still majority country, moves away from it, then the immigrants aren't enough to keep supporting it.
And I can tell you from having worked with the Hispanic immigrant population, the next generation is losing the faith at the same rate as everyone else.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Because it's supporting. I mean, I would say that you can even look at my family and you can see the grandparents are very strong, and then the next generation, the baby boomers, are like a little bit weaker. And then by the time you get to my generation, there's
very few.
There's
left.
me.
There's you.
Right.
It's true. Like it's just not that
Holding
many.
down the fort. Because you have a brother, right?
I had a brother, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and he wasn't really practicing. And then my cousins, I guess one of my cousins is, but I'm probably the most faithful, or at least trying to live the faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I
reality.
I can relate to that. At least, not to call out like family members. That's not.
My family's
not
not
my
listening
intention.
to this. They don't even know this exists. So
Oh, really?
no.
Right. I meant
You're
my
safe.
family members,
You're
but
safe. You're safe.
yeah, I'll just tell them not to listen to this episode.
That's right.
Father Joe's like, no.
Mom's got to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, my mom listens to every episode. That I can tell you.
My mom does too, and then texts me about the things I got wrong.
Oh yeah, I get the same thing. Yeah, I'm like, no,
That
yeah,
story didn't happen that way.
I know, and I get like, I never did that. You're not telling the truth. I'm like, okay, that's enough.
It's on the air. It must be true.
Right.
So, without this fundamentally Christian worldview, then, is it possible to have a just and fair society? Because certainly a lot of people are trying to advance the cause of social justice without the Judeo-Christian worldview. Is it even possible?
I think, like philosophically speaking, you can reach certain conclusions through just reason. So for that reason, like you can prove the existence of God, and then after proving the existence of God, you can prove that God is all good, right? He's like the fullness of good.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, I'm tempted to say that maybe it's possible technically, but I think St. Thomas Aquinas is the one who says that apart from revelation, if man depended exclusively on reason, the amount of people that would figure this out would be so small, and even those people would mix in error. I mean, nobody would ever get it totally right, and for that reason, I'm going to say no. I don't think it is actually reasonably possible.
Well, I mean, you see it in society, right? I mean, you see people that think they're doing good and they're actually doing the opposite.
Sure.
But they believe in their heart that they're doing the right thing.
Sure.
And it's actually wrong. Like not only like slightly wrong, like very wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the right goal, it's just the wrong methods about getting it across. I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, where, the right goal, ending racism, but the way in which you're going about it through revolution instead of through love and through peace is questionable,
Right. I would say that one of the things when we talk about the dignity of the human being, and I think the one thing that really struck me is I used to volunteer with the CFR Sisters, Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. I always say friars, but I think Sisters of the Renewal is a proper term. They have several soup kitchens, throughout, and I would volunteer at the Father Solana Soup Kitchen in Harlem. And one of the things that's there is that they don't have the folks that are coming to eat line up at a counter and then get a tray and sit down at a table. The sisters and the volunteers that come and help serve. They sit at a table and then they're served. And it's like, because this is a dignity of the human being. It's like, wouldn't you want to be served?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I just, that always stuck with me. And it's just this beautiful, it's not just almost a shame walk down the aisle. It's like, no, we're inviting you into a meal and you're going to sit at our table. And we're going to serve you and enjoy a meal with you. And that's like so beautiful. And like, that's the message that, when I think, and mostly it's minorities here in Harlem, it's mostly minorities, mostly Hispanic, but there's several, other minorities. And that's the message that we should be sending.
I used to work with a soup kitchen in college out in Steubenville, and they actually kind of took that idea one step further. And they asked the men, and mostly men, but the men and women, to then help with the cleaning of the place, which I thought was very interesting because work gives us so much dignity.
Right.
And so it's not just we're serving you. It's like we're working on this together. This is a project that we believe you can contribute to.
Oh, wow.
So whether
great.
it's cleaning the dishes or tables or sweeping up,
Right.
Yes. The sisters in Harlem had a very strict cleaning schedule and scheme that we would have to follow after it. So that was always the most interesting part. Is we would go do like midday prayer and then clean for an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
With all the volunteers. So.
Did you ever sit down and like eat with people?
So we would be serving. So we wouldn't be sitting down with them, but there would always be a team of people, and sometimes you'd volunteer for it, or they would get selected. The sisters would voluntold you, and you would walk up and down. There would be a line to get into the refectory to sit down to eat, and you would go up and down the aisle, up and down the line, and just talk to people. And then they would have another group that would always be singing, praise and worship music, or like this singing guitar rosary thing that they would do in Spanish. And a lot of the people, at least culturally, they're Catholic, so they know all the prayers and stuff, and they sing along, and it's great. So
Yeah.
language is a little bit of a barrier. My Spanish is not as good as it needs to be able to go into some conversations, but
Right.
Sure.
But yeah. There was some great Knights of Columbus guys that would come down from Westchester every week, and they were just awesome. So they had it down to a science.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
that's
cool
great.
thing to do. So, we were kind of talking about the origins of Catholic social teaching, how it really sprang out of the Industrial Revolution. And not too long ago, the World Economic Forum published some interesting things saying that we are now in the fourth Industrial Revolution. I guess the first was the factories, and then it was, I don't even know what the second and third one is.
I wonder if one of them was automobiles.
It might be.
Could be.
It might be.
Yeah, the original Industrial Revolution would have been like 1750 to 1820, when we had mills, like river mills, that would start up to power
That's true.
machines.
Yeah. That's true.
Are you sure you weren't a history major?
No, but I'm a
You
history
were pulling,
buff.
you were pulling so many facts out here.
Yeah, just
my specialty.
dropping truth, man. But they say that the fourth one is the digital revolution, which absolutely has changed the way in which people work. I mean, just look at COVID. Everyone's
Right.
working from home now, and gosh, if our internet goes down, no one can do anything.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the people that are most vulnerable in our society has changed since the Industrial Revolution. It's no longer the factory worker who has to work long hours or the child laborer. Who is the vulnerable today?
I think it is the child.
In what way?
I think there has never been more access to material that can hurt you than now. I'm thinking about particularly pornography. You know what I mean? Like children that are like, yeah, I mean, you read stats and people will say that they like were first, what is the word I'm looking
exposed.
for? Yeah, exposed to pornography at like, I don't know, 8 or 9.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's because of the internet. Obviously there are things about the internet that are wonderful, but when I thought of, and from the worker standpoint, right? Because this is from like the participant standpoint, maybe. I think from a worker standpoint, it would be sex workers. Like there's, I imagine that, prior to the internet, people were not, wrapped into this kind of business.
That's true.
Perhaps at such a large rate. They call it the oldest profession in the world. So I'm not saying it didn't exist, obviously.
Right.
But it didn't exist in this medium.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about children generally is, I think the biggest harm that you can do to a child nowadays, besides pornography and some of the more truly like overtly dastardly things,
Yeah.
is I think in modern society, and you see this actually with the unemployment statistics right now, is we've removed a lot of, we're taking away people's agency, meaning their ability to make decisions for themselves, and the power to do that and the choice to do that. Where we're telling our children that they have to, if you don't do this, if you don't believe us, if you don't trust in us, meaning the government or whoever's indoctrinating them, then you cannot succeed. And if you you know, to chart our own path has come under attack at the earliest levels of education, and especially in the minority communities. And I think once you take away somebody's agency, especially at such a young age, then they almost enter into the real world, in a place of defeat. I mean, you see that with depression statistics and people that don't have meaning in their life, that immediately run to the government and to, you know, the medical establishment for all their woes, or to drugs and other addictions like pornography. I think it's just, I think that's a systemic issue around our society. And like, kind of, how do you expect people to have faith and to believe in God if they don't have the option to?
Yeah.
Or they don't feel that they have the option to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an interesting perspective, because I was kind of taking that question in a different direction in my mind. Like the two that kind of come to my mind are, first of all, the elderly, because one of the things about the digital revolution is that it focuses on the new. You know, you always want the latest technology. You always want, and everything's so disposable, as Pope Francis says, you know,
Right.
disposable humanity. And the elderly are so disposed of because they have no wisdom to offer. They, you know, their time is washed up, according to most people who want to glorify the newest and best and
Right.
brightest. And of course, they're obviously often left out of the digital revolution.
Right. And also, you know, if we, like we were saying before, right, like the culture of our society is so individual, you know, like that is what is emphasized. And so there's almost like no responsibility to the elderly,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It's like put them somewhere and,
Forget about
you know, forget about them.
When actually the elderly are the ones that can offer the most wisdom.
it. Sometimes.
Yeah.
I've learned that gray hair does not make you wise.
No.
Automatically.
No.
You just look at Congress.
Yeah, well.
A lot of gray hairs there.
Although I would argue that the newer congressmen are not wise either. But
Oh,
anyways,
that's true. You have a point.
you had like a sweet spot between like 40 and 60. No, I'm no, I think it's true, but I do think society might be leaving them behind a bit. But then again, I mean, I do think some of the digital revolution stuff for the ones that are hip, like my grandmother who was 97, she passed away last year, but she had Facebook, and that actually kept her connected because she was pretty much
That's true.
homebound. So there is some positives. I think like things like Uber and Lyft, although never mind on Lyft for a moment. Uber and Lyft, I think they're going to provide a level of mobility for the next generation
That's
of other
possible.
people that's way more than,
That's true.
you know, you're not as worried about losing your driver's license. So I think there's a lot of positives for the more hip grandparents out there.
Yeah.
Right.
The other group that I thought was impacted probably is those who work in the trades. You know, when I was chaplain at Trinity High School, we prided ourselves on 100% college acceptance. And I would look at that class and think 100% of these kids should not be going to college.
Right.
But there's this pressure that you have to have some sort of job that's going to be good paying in this digital
Right.
world.
Yeah.
When in reality, first of all, plumbing and woodworking is a totally noble profession.
Oh yeah.
But now it's so badly looked down upon. Like, oh, you couldn't make it, you know, in a smart kids college. You got-
Right. Yeah.
No, and I hear people in the trades, I like say like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, to get somebody to come out to my house right now and do a work is impossible. There's no one out there that wants to do this work, and it's good work. It's good paying, and
Very good paying.
And my cousin, who's an electrician, he cleans up as an electrician. So from a financial perspective, it's really amazing. And there's a huge what's interesting. So I work in the private equity industry, and we have a lot of private companies throughout the United States. Most of them are smaller, and I will say that the number one issue among every single company is can't find people to work.
That's what I hear.
They can't find, because people would rather they feel that they've lost their dignity if they go and work on a factory floor and get paid $50 an hour,
Yeah.
which is a lot of money, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'll soon be our minimum wage. If
Yeah,
some people have their way.
Yeah, especially for the teenager at McDonald's.
But $30 hamburger? Sure.
Yeah, no, pass.
I'll take fries with that.
Right. So anyway, but I think that's on the dignity of workers. I do agree on the trades.
Yeah. Well, we actually ran out of time. We have like so much more to talk about. So tune in next time to our next episode, which hopefully will be Catholic Social Teaching Part 2, where we talk about some of the other themes. We talked about the dignity of workers. We talked about the dignity of the human person, the idea of freedom, and how faith kind of intersects with politics. And next time we're going to talk about the caring for God's creation and the preferential option with the poor and solidarity and all that kind of good stuff, which if your kind of mind is boggling, you're like, what the heck is that even talking about? Tune in next time and you'll find out.
Can't wait.
On Veritas Catholic Radio, 1350 AM, and also wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us. God bless. Goodbye.